thanks to everyone for coming to the How to Learn How to Troll Your Friends and Make Them Hate You panel. I'm kidding. I guess I'll just go ahead and kick this off here, because this is probably as good as we're going to get. That's okay. You guys will watch it later again once you're not drunk. I guess the whole point of this panel is that I find myself quite often either on the internet or at conventions or convention-shaped objects dealing with people who want to talk about the things they love but are jerks. Paolo, would you mind grabbing that door for me? Yeah, please and thank you. So basically, I'm going to run through this, and we're going to talk about a couple of different things. We're going to talk about what makes a good argument. We're going to talk about misused words and how to not have them, and some common argument fallacies, as well as the new and updated rules about social media. I say new and updated. I usually give this panel with a good friend of mine named John Hogreef, who unfortunately cannot be here tonight. So, yes, all two of you here up in the front row, you are now primed and ready. So I guess we'll just go ahead and start. So I have an English major, which is normally useless, but did teach me a couple of things relevant to this. Specifically, what makes a good argument. A good argument is one that can be questioned and tested and is based in fact. A good argument does not necessarily, a valid argument does not necessarily preclude equally valid arguments, and I'll explain that in a minute. Also, not every argument has a clear answer, and there is no inherent need for a question to be definitively solved. I say these things because normally in fandom, let's say, someone will come up and they'll argue, this character is obviously X. X could be anything. It could be a mental state, it could be sexuality, it could be whatever. But they will say, this character is definitively this, and I know it because I'm saying it. And because I'm saying it, it's true. It's sitting great, right? There's no fact behind that, it's just opinion. But that being said, once you accept the fact that you're arguing something, just because someone has said that something is true, doesn't necessarily invalidate somebody else saying that something else is true. And likewise, the big thing that a lot of fandoms can't wrap their head around is that certain questions don't need definitive answers. Sometimes it's okay to just say, hey, you know what, I've come to this conclusion, and somebody else can say, you know what, I've come with this conclusion. And you could both be happy, and it's okay. Not that anybody's going to listen to that. But now, before we get too much farther in this, I do have to go through a couple of things that are misused quite a lot. The first is the word theory, specifically with regards to, like, if somebody's saying, oh man, my fan theory, blah, blah, blah. So what you actually mean is hypothesis, because when you're talking about theory with regards to laying down things like this, what you really want is hypothesis, because a hypothesis is something that is tested. If a hypothesis is tested enough times, that becomes a theory, right? The theory of gravity, the theory of all these other things. So not that you can ever take away the phrase fan theory from fans, because unfortunately it's too good now. People like it too much. But just understand, when you're trying to talk to someone, you should actually be saying, hey, here's my hypothesis about this character. The second is, well, this begs the question. Begging the question does not mean what you think it means. You might instead want to say, this prompts the question, or something like that. But begging the question is actually a legal term, and it has nothing to do with what you think it does. Also, just if you use the word, or if you use the phrase common sense, or variations thereof of it just makes sense, or it just doesn't make sense, you've already lost your argument. basically, the Voltaire quote of "common sense is not so common" is true. You can't necessarily expect that what you're saying is going to be common to everybody else. People come from a lot of different walks of life, and so what you may have as an understanding may not be what anybody else has. So, that being said, let's go right into common argument fallacies. The first one of these fallacies is the fallacy, because yo dog, I heard you like fallacies. The fallacy is going to argue that because somebody has a fallacy in their argument, it is incorrect. I feel this necessary to get out of the way first, because later on, as I arm you with other tools, just because you understand that something is a fallacy doesn't mean you should go and shit on your friend for using it. Because, again, just because they're a jerk doesn't make them less right, if that makes sense. It does, however, make them a jerk. Now, all right, so, popular one, ad hominem, attacking the person, not the argument. Paolo could tell me that his favorite Overwatch ship is, Mercy X May. And I could say, wow, that's dumb. That's terrible. Why would you ever want that? Because obviously the one true pairing is Mercy X Pharah. And, right? And so, right there's no actual substance to the argument. It's just me attacking Paolo, right? And at this point, again, if you do this, you've lost. Another fun one is declaring certain topics taboo. Just by saying, let's say, again, actually, here, let's do a fun Homestuck one, since we've got at least one Homestuck in the audience. Hi, Eric. So let's say we're talking about. Actually, I'm sorry. I've purged Homestuck from my brain. It's better this way. Yeah, let's just talk about shipping. So let's just say, for example, that you've headcanoned a particular set of characters to be a certain sexual pairing and together, right? And somebody might come up to you and say, well, actually, I don't think that's necessarily true. And you say, no, we're not talking about that. It's taboo. This is definitely how this is. We're not talking about it. I refuse to hear any arguments. Again, this is basically saying, I don't care enough to craft an argument against your argument, and it's admitting defeat. Guilt by association, which is a subset of ad hominem, discrediting an opinion based on who the person associates with. This is actually what we should use with Homestuck, right? So if somebody starts saying they've got ideas about something, and somebody's like, wait, aren't you in the Homestuck fandom? And just immediately discredits everything that person has to say. This is guilt by association, which, again, sometimes is a good indicator of what the person actually knows, but isn't actually something useful for discrediting your argument. Argument from authority. The person making this argument, is an authority on the subject, and they have an opinion on a subject, and therefore their opinion must be correct. Case in point, myself, right? You could fallacy away everything I'm saying here by argument from authority, because at this point, I'm the one giving the panel, and therefore you guys are all buying in and saying that my opinion is correct. Is it? Maybe not. We'll find out. Another great one, straw man. Restating an opponent's theory to make it sound ridiculous, then dismiss it without actually speaking to it. What's a great straw man? Paolo, hit me with something from Overwatch. What's a popular fan theory from Overwatch? Okay, so no, that's fine. Let's go with Maya's Bay. No, that requires too much knowledge. I'm trash. But let's go with the Maya's Bay, right? And by saying oh yes, this character, this is the optimal character in this game, and I could then say, what, that character that does absolutely no damage and has a terrible ultimate and is also ugly? No, and just dismisses it. Obviously, there's no actual substance to your argument. You may see a theme here, right? Like, by not actually arguing, you're failing. Snow job is one of my favorite fallacies. Snow job, unfortunately nowhere near as fun as it might sound, is one often used by Game Theory, one of my least favorite YouTube channels. So a snow job is overwhelming the audience with a ridiculous amount of facts and or stating statistics they have no real way of understanding, thereby proving their argument. If you've ever seen an episode of Game Theory... Yeah, more than 3. If you've ever seen an episode of Game Theory... I'll give you 2 seconds. If you've ever seen an episode of Game Theory, by the end of the episode, dude's just going through with like 87 different things, rapid fire. He's like, and we're done. But that's just a theory. This is a snow job. What did you want to say? Yeah, bullying sounds good, because at that point, you're not letting someone interject. Of course, a lot of these are from YouTube videos or things like that, so there's no like interaction, right? It's just one person. But at that point, if you're just going through just rapid fire, like listing off 1,000 different things and just random infographics and things to make you look like you know what you're talking about, this is a snow job. Let's see, let's scroll right on down here. Shifting burden of proof, another great one. By making the opponent trying to disprove something, often used when your argument may not be correct but cannot be completely disproved, thereby leaving you correct by default. Or, in other words, one of those situations like, well, you can't disprove what I'm saying, so come on, what's your evidence? Oh, you don't have any? Guess I'm right. Yeah, no, don't do that. Overgeneralization. Incorrectly applying the results of a small number of instances to apply in all cases. Yeah. It's like hyperbole. It is also like extrapolating, if you're a statistics fan. Basically, if you have too small of an amount of data and you try and just apply everything, like, for example, I could say, let's see, most of the people in this room are white, and therefore only white people care about the panel that I'm doing. This is obviously incorrect, but this is the kind of thing that you do. It's obviously a little more subtle when you do it in other arguments, but we've got lying with statistics, another great one. Using real-world analogs for in-universe situations. This is how a lot of the who would win kind of videos work, because they're not in the same universe. My example to myself was Yowie hands. If you're familiar with the term Yowie hands, sometimes in some Yowies you have these completely disproportionate men. And by disproportionate, I mean like they will be 7 feet tall and have hands the size of like small cars kind of things, right? And so people will go and extrapolate and be like, oh, well, clearly these people are a race of monsters, which admittedly, if you look at them, they are. But that's the kind of thing. You can't necessarily use real-world logic in the universe of something created by someone else, unless it's explicitly stated, in which case, go ahead. One that I see a lot is trying to prove the value of coins in Mario. Like by saying, yes, well, we know that Mario's height is this high, and based on his height in pixels, we know that the coins are this many pixels, and so therefore, like, using the real-world weight of gold and exchange rates, no, just never do it. False analogy, incorrectly comparing one thing to another to prove a point. This is more easily summed up as apples to oranges. This is common enough, I don't actually want to go through it, because I assume everybody has heard the phrase, it's apples to oranges. Let's see. Essentializing. Saying that something is the way that something is right now is the only way that it will ever be. Also, something is that way by nature, right? Like, Gosh. You know what, actually, like, fictional character sexuality is a great one for this. Just saying, like, oh, well, you know, this male character is in a relationship with a female character, and therefore they must be straight. And they're straight because they're in a straight relationship. That's how it is. That's how it's got to be. Obviously, that's how it is. Equivocation. Using ambiguous language or failing to define language one uses in order to win by technicality. This is, if you may remember the phrase, yes, technically correct. That's the best kind of correct. Basically, by leaving the words you say ambiguous, it allows you to redefine them on the fly later. By saying, oh, no, I didn't mean that like that, because, you know, this word has multiple definitions, right? And so actually the context I meant it in is this. It allows you to save your ass, however, you're wrong. One that is rather sad, E for effort, or A for effort, depending on who you are. Something has to be right just because of how much time and effort was put into presenting it. This is something that happens a lot with fan hypotheses, where someone will say, but I spent like 12 weeks going and proving this with all of these things, and so it has to be right. It has to be. It doesn't have to be. You could be wrong. Spoiler, people are human. People can be wrong. Even computers can be wrong sometimes. So no, nothing has to be right. You can, in fact, make mistakes, and that's okay. That's what I want people to take away from this panel, is that, you know what? You don't have to make the best argument. You just don't have to be a jerk about it. Either or reasoning. Trying to end an argument by presenting only two options for how it can conclude, when in reality there are many options. Yes. It can be, yes. So, like... Oh, yeah. There's two types of people in the world, this and this. You know, really, like, the two kinds of people thing is literally the best example I can give. I'm not even going to try and make a better one. Because obviously, there's more than two kinds of people, unless you're talking about numbers in binary. Let's see. Paralysis of analysis. One I enjoy just because of its rhyming. An argument saying that since it's impossible to have all the data on a subject, no conclusions should ever be reached. See Game Theory's Five Nights at Friday's videos. Because basically, every Five Nights at Freddy's video that came out from Game Theory a while back, when the new one would come out, it would completely discredit everything in the first one. It would be like, well, all right, like, we can't really ever know everything that we've got, so, I mean, I guess no conclusion should really be reached, but also I just wasted your last 20 minutes on this video proving all of that, so, monetization. Yeah, like, comment, subscribe. False pattern recognition. This one's a pretty common one of the more hilariously used in the Illuminati confirmed sort of memes, where, yeah, like, it'll be a triangle. You'll zoom in on the triangle, and then you'll zoom in on the triangle, and then it's the eye from the dollar bill. Illuminati confirmed, right? Like, this is more commonly used in other things where it's not quite so silly, but that's the most recognizable one. One thing I have to bring up because of my English major is death of the author and word of God. So a lot of people, depending on when you got your education or how you feel about things, will say that you can only ever analyze a work based off of what's in the game and only what's in the game, or what's in the work, what's only in the work, and not anything to do with something in the real world, be it something that the author created or real life events or anything like that. That you should only take what's in the work, and that's the only thing. Word of God, on the other hand, is saying, the creator said that this is the intended thing, and therefore that's how it is. You may remember argument from authority. I personally like to analyze things looking at both options. Because again, just because an argument is valid doesn't necessarily mean it invalidates other valid arguments. You could make a completely sound argument using stuff that's only in the work, but it could be that in real life, I'm going to pull out Neon Genesis Evangelion for a minute. Right? Like, we all know that the creator was super, super depressed. Same with, like, Gundam Wing and a lot of these other shows. Like, the creators are super depressed and not doing great, and so a lot of the things in the show end up reflecting parts of their life. So you can't necessarily just death of the author it, but on the other hand, if you were to do that and just examine what's in the work, you're still going to get a decent argument. So, I'm going to go into a couple of fan hypothesis archetypes. Yes, go ahead. Really? Yeah. In case that didn't get picked up in the microphones, that was the creator of Katamari Damacy said that they created the game because they did not like the idea of capitalism, or he was afraid of it. Yeah, the game represents his fear of capitalism, which, admittedly, like, you usually end Katamari by rolling up the world, so I could see that argument. All right, but look, so there's a couple of common... Oh, yes, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, spoiler. Yeah, so actually, that's something I'm going to get to later in this panel is how not to interact with creators of work. This is more common now thanks to social media, but yes, no, I mean there have been things like Hideki Anno getting death threats because of Evangelion. Like this has been a thing for a long time. It's just easier now with social media, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, no, it's not so much a fallacy, but no, I promise, I will get back to that. Yeah. Actually, you know what? Here, let's talk about that. I'll get to the fan theory archetypes later. So it's important to understand, especially these days, that while there are some creators that do listen to fans, for the most part, creators have to stay away from any fan-related work, right? If anybody reads the webcomic Girl Genius, there's a little spoiler on the website that says, hey, here's an unofficial FanWorks page that we're going to link you to. We're not actually allowed to read this because our lawyer said so, just in case somebody should decide to try and sue us for stealing their work. Right? Now, this doesn't happen so much in other things, but what we find a lot nowadays is with ready access to creators via Twitter or Tumblr or anything else, with now that you don't have to physically send a letter to someone and that your reaction to something can be instantaneous, a lot of people are jerks on the internet to people who create the things that they like. Part of that is the faceless, God, what is it? There's a Penny Arcade acronym for being a douchebag on the internet. I don't remember what it is. Greater internet dickwad theory. Thank you. That's that. The idea that you can just be a jerk on the internet because it's anonymous. So yeah, this has been a problem. Most recently in the Steven Universe fandom, you had one of the creators chased off Twitter basically because she was accused of queerbaiting in an episode that she did. In a right and just world, this would not happen. people would go and voice displeasure about things, but not actually attack the people that are creating the things they like. Like back in the day with Hideki Anno and many other authors, if a series ends in a certain way and fans don't like it, people revolt. People send death threats. They do all these crazy things, which one, is not necessary, and two, is terrible, and three, is a great way to never get more of the stuff that you like. Um, it is. It is completely narcissistic. Yes, Paolo. Yeah, Arthur Conan Doyle, right front and center. Yes. So Mass Effect's ending is actually kind of interesting, right? This is one of the situations where people's negative reaction actually went to the creators and was like, you know what? Maybe we screwed up. Maybe we need to fix this. Like, maybe we actually want people around to come back to this franchise. And so they fixed it. And like, sure, some people may cry it's George Lucasing their work, but on the other hand, like, it worked out okay. For once. Just this once, everybody lives, right? Like, but that doesn't often happen. I guess with Mass Effect, enough people were just vocal about their displeasure at it that they were like, all right, maybe we should fix this. As opposed to, this is terrible and we're gonna murder all of you and hang you by your toes from our ceilings and like drain you of your blood. Or whatever other ridiculous things you might be able to come up with. So, yes. As a short way to answer what you said. All right, here, let's go to fan theory archetypes. I'll loop back to that at the end because there's something I do want to talk about. But these are things that have been around for a long time and sound great when you're 12, and sound great to your friends when you're 12. And now none of us are 12, and now they all suck and are boring. The brain in the jar / just a dream archetype. Things like Ashes in a Coma in Pokemon. Metal Gear Solid 3 is actually a VR mission. Squall actually died in Final Fantasy, whatever that was. These are all shifting burden of proof problems, right? Because you say these things and there isn't actually a way to disprove them, but there's also not really a way to prove them. Yeah. Yeah. What were you saying? Oh, good. You're both saying Russell's teapot. So, yeah. Like, you can't do it. Yes. Yeah. So Blade Runner, I don't want to talk about Blade Runner. Using my own fallacy of taboo, I don't want to talk about Blade Runner, but I only don't want to talk about Blade Runner because there's 5 different endings, right? And so in order to discuss it, you would need your own panel to talk about the problems of Blade Runner. Are we talking book or movie? Because I haven't seen the movie. I mean, he is literally in a dream for certain parts of it. Like, I guess it depends on if you stop reading at Ender's Game or if you read the rest of the books. I would say if you wanted to answer that question as to whether or not that's actually a brain in a jar or just a dream, you'd probably need to read both Ender's Game and the other one from the point of view of the scrawny kid. What's his name? Ender's Shadow is the name of that book. I have not read Ender's Shadow because I am a terrible sci-fi nerd, so I can't actually answer that one. But I would say in order to set that one, you'd have to have at least both of those as your base to argue from. Another one that just makes me want to punch people. X is a coping mechanism or grief or whatever. Like Totoro is a Shinigami trying to ferry people onto the afterlife, or Majora's Mask that it's the 7 stages of coping with, or whatever. Or there was that theory about Rugrats about how the only real character is Angelica and everyone else represents different. Or Ed, Ed, and Eddie are in purgatory because of how things don't change and how, again, each of the characters represents a different, a different sin or something. No. Um, unnecessary exploit. Unnecessary extrapolation. Um, quite common in video games. Like Pokemon is a post-war story. Um, I mean, yes, you do have military people in it, Lieutenant Surge, right off the bat. But the level that people go to, you're extrapolating from a very small pool of data. There isn't a whole lot of backstory to Pokemon in the games themselves. If you start considering each adaptation of it, then there's all sorts of other things that go on. But at that point, it's apples to oranges. Yes? I No, I can't. I actually can't talk about Star Fox. I don't consider myself enough of an authority on Star Fox to talk about it. Um, no, no, please. Actually, here. You know what? Do we have a? The, yeah, here. Actually, come up here for a sec because I want to make sure that this gets in the microphone. Um, yeah, sure. Yes. Yes, okay, and so that they would be amputated. Yeah, I mean, right, like, it is unnecessary extrapolation, and it's using real world statistics and facts to describe something in a fantasy world. Oh, well, see, and then that's the weird one. It's like, oh, you start using things, but. Kills me. Uh, all right, actually, here I have one other one of these, and then I will get to you because I saw your hand up. Another unnecessary extrapolation that Final Fantasy 3 and 8 are in the same world. There are Final Fantasy games that are in the same world because they're tagged as that because they're the Evil East games. There's also one other game. What was that? There's another Evil East game that isn't a Final Fantasy game. Vagrant Story. Yes. Um, though those are in fact all in the same world. They tell you right up front. Um, with the Final Fantasy games, a lot of them have recurring themes and things because it's the same people making them. It's the same set of monsters. It's the same set of themes in a lot of them. The same that Sid is the same character in every Final Fantasy. Like, no, they're just reusing names, like Biggs and Wedge showing up. Like, you're not gonna say Biggs and Wedge in Final Fantasy are the same as in Star Wars. Like, just because they have the same name doesn't make them the same character. Just because they're in the same franchise doesn't mean they're the same character. Um, but anyway, yes, you had your hand up. Yes, unnecessary extrapolation. Things that are pulling, like, you have a very small set of data about the work, and you're like, all right, well, I'm just going to make this entire idea about how the work is. It doesn't always come from a bad place. And in fact, that whole that whole trying to extrapolate things is how you get a lot of really cool fan fiction, right? Like going and thinking like, all right, but like, oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, unnecessary does kind of have a negative connotation to it. In this particular case, as you can hear me going back and using another fallacy to try and redefine something, but in this particular case, unnecessary is more of just saying in regards to the original work, right? It's things that like, yes, they're cool to do, they're cool and fun, but like to go and say this is how it is, that's where the problem shows up. Now, right. So now that we've gone through all that, we've gone through fallacies, we've gone through archetypes, we touched on interacting with with creators, I do actually want to go over some positive things, right? Because like I'm not just a bitter cynic, although being involved in fandoms can make you a bitter cynic after a while. But there are positive ways to interact, right? You can do transformative works, be it fan art or making fan games. R.I.P. To the Metroid and Pokemon games that have just been taken down recently. You can make fan fiction. You can do all these things, right? And really, when you do these things, everybody else interacting with you is burdened under Wheaton's law, which is to say, don't be a dick, right? This is the major tenet of interacting with fandoms: is don't be a dick. Just don't be a dick. If somebody writes fan fiction that involves a pairing that you don't like, for example, right? Like, there's zero call to tell that person to go and kill themselves. Like, you might really disagree, but you know what you could instead do? Instead of, I don't know, being a tremendous asshole, you could make your own transformative work using the pairing that you like. And suddenly, instead of shitting on someone for something they love, you've both been able to contribute something you love, and everything's okay. Yes? So yeah, those interact in an interesting way, right? So like on the one hand, you should maybe be following the "don't be a dick" clause, as we used to call it in our sci-fi club. But yeah, so the being anonymous on the internet prompts you to be a dick, right? And so it's sort of where you have to kind of hope that people are good and that people will not shit on you for things that you love. This, of course, will not happen because, unfortunately, people are terrible, and people will go and do terrible things. Which brings me actually to my next point, is that if someone is being a dick to you on the internet, the best thing that you can do is ignore them. The second best thing you can do is go and make more stuff that you like, whether or not it pisses off that person. Because, spoiler, vocal minorities are minorities. Like, they are small, and just because 3 people are like, ugh, your art is terrible, and you can't draw hands, and also, you should die. Like, yeah, nobody can draw hands, all right? Like, let's get that out of the way. No one draws hands. But no. Yeah, it is a generalization. Yeah. Oh, you mean the shingles that they put on people's heads? Yeah, no. Like, to be fair, Uncanny Valley, right? But no. But yeah, so it is one of those things where you've got people who shouldn't be a dick and people who can be a dick. And so it's a personal choice. Hopefully you'll choose not to be a dick. But if you do choose to be a dick, hopefully everyone else will ignore you. So, yes. I would say more it's like the Russian Revolution. Um, no, about the Special Olympics? Uh, yes. No. I would say probably an example that might not get anyone killed in here for being insensitive would be the Russian Revolution, right? So you had the Bolshevik Party, the party that calls themselves the Big Party, when in fact it's a very vocal minority who just merely by saying that, yes, we're the big people, we have power, they bootstrapped themselves into power and then assassinated the Tsar. I'm sorry that this accidentally became a Russian history panel, but like, it turns out that that this vocal minority somehow coming to power and then shitting all over everyone thing happens a lot in history. I won't go into any recent examples, but you know what they are. So yeah, no, it happens. Yeah. I mean, I remember that episode, although it's been quite some time. Um, I think I may have lost the train of the argument somewhere, or the train of the statement while you were explaining it. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, if we're talking about like, yeah, unnecessary patriotism, like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So the funny story, there is a good application of that back in the olden days of writing fan fiction. Yeah. No, but there was this thing where people had the opinion of don't like, don't read, which so it would be the kind of thing where it it can be kind of a fallacy of saying like I don't want to hear your arguments. If you don't like it, get out. On the other hand, it prevented a lot of hate, right? Like you got a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't like this ship, and instead of them going, I'm gonna go and write terrible comments on something, they're like, you know what? I don't like it. I'm not gonna read it. Now, of course, this is very silly and gets parodied in My Immortal and any number of other things. But but yeah. So if the whole sentiment of if you don't like it, get out. Yeah, like it's something that has to be used very cautiously. Yeah, it is sometimes well, yeah, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? Like it can be a fallacy. Sometimes it can be right, but it's still not a good way to argue. Um, yeah. Um, let's see. Did anybody else have something they wanted to bring up? Maybe. Yeah. Right. So some people, one, don't care, right? Some people, once they latch onto a thought, they're like, well, I'm sticking with it. That's my thought, and I'm going to die with this ship. Like, this is a problem. You see this problem a lot in things that I will not talk about because this is a music and gaming festival and not a political convention. But yes, so there are situations where people will tack on to an ideology or a thought, and no matter what you do to try and present facts and whatever, they just won't hear it. This is the taboo fallacy. This is the no, no, no. I'm not going to talk about it. You're wrong. I don't care. Um, actually, it's a number of fallacies wrapped up in one. But taboo. So what? So like if yeah, I'm trying to think. I think I've been looking at the wrong camera this entire time. Shit. But anyway, so let's say that what's a good one? That no, 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 I don't want to talk about that. We're talking about music and games here. No, let's go with yeah. We'll talk about chiptunes. That's okay. So like saying that you have to be perfectly authentic with how you create chiptune music, and you must create it exactly as the original composers for those consoles had to make it. Things like it's only real music if you're making an NES track and it's composed for the NES. And then someone comes up and says, and admittedly this is an opinion thing, but someone will come up and say, hey, but what about this? And you'll say, no, no, nope, I'm not talking about it. You're wrong. The only way it's right is this one way that I believe, and if you don't like it, flip the table, walk out. Yes. Yes, purists is it. Purists, elitists, whatever you want to call it. I should clarify, I write for Chiptunes Equals Win. This is why I care about chiptune things and just immediately went to that. But so, yes, softest woodwork, wouldn't it? Yeah. Yes, Bello. Yeah. No True Scotsman. All right. So yeah, No True Scotsman is actually a subset of the moving goalpost. Uh, this is the idea that you're like, someone says, "Oh, I'm a fan of Steven Universe," and I'm like, "I'm a fan, and I really like Lapis X Peridot, right? I like that ship." And some people would say, "Well, no true fan of Steven Universe would like, the Lapis Peridot pairing. True fans only like blah blah blah." And so, what this basically ends up happening is you get to keep redefining the group that you're in, so that it only includes people that you want. Basically, as soon as someone brings up something that you don't like, you're like, well, no true fan of the thing that I like would believe that. So you're clearly not a fan. And instead, I've now redrawn these lines to only include my friends. Yes. Yeah. So moving goalpost sucks, right? Like, no, it is literally a no-win situation. It is where one person just decides to keep giving you an increasingly arcane set of things that you have to try and speak to, and really, you never win, they never lose, they just keep themselves from losing. They don't actually try and win. Like, it is an option in an argument. Like, I guess you can Kobayashi Maru that way, but like, you shouldn't. Yeah, no, it's bad. Don't ever move in goalpost. Yeah, it is, because you can't defeat it, because you're changing, well, the person that you're arguing against is changing the rules every time you make an argument, right? Like, it's like you're playing checkers, and every second they start introducing new house rules about how the pieces can move, and how big the board is, and like how many jumps you can make, and eventually you don't even want to go and argue with them, or in this case, you don't want to play checkers with them, because it's not what you signed up for. It's not what you thought you were getting into, and this is how they win, by just preventing you from actually being able to argue to them. Yeah, it counts for them in some weird, perverse way. That in their mind they've won because you couldn't win. Yes. Hive mentality. Tumblr? No, I say that I love Tumblr. I'm on Tumblr all the time. But like, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, just in case nobody heard that. It was talking about hive mentality and like what's a good example of hive mentality. Yeah, no, so that is interesting that hyper individualism is a subset of hive mentality, right? Because it's still everybody thinking I have to be separate and different and I have to do something else. But if everybody thinks I have to do something else, at what point are you actually all contributing to the same movement? See punk. Uh, but no, not see punk. See punk. Now, yeah, no steppy, please. Um, uh, anyway, um, let's see. All right, how much time do we have left? We have 9 minutes, and they're probably going to want to break down this room sometime pretty soon. So I'm going to say, I'm going to talk about a couple more positive ways to interact with fandoms, in hopes that people will actually go out and do this. The number one positive way to interact with a fandom, although there are caveats to this, is by creating a space in which you can interact with fans, like a convention or festival, like a club. Some people in here know I started several clubs when I was in college, and I was a part of a couple others. That these were sci-fi clubs and anime clubs and things like that. And by creating a space where people could go and comfortably talk about whatever it is they wanted to talk about, you've helped build a community, right? This is great. The problem here is if we go back to No True Scotsman, if somebody starts disagreeing with how you think about something, or if you've built your organization on a particular ideology, and certain people in your group start breaking away from that, then it causes the whole group that you've built to fracture and become two separate communities. Admittedly, not always a bad thing. There are several old conventions that have come this way. There was a... Well, I won't go into fandom history, but there are many old sci-fi conventions that things fell apart and reformed, and suddenly you had twice as many conventions. Which, again, not necessarily a bad thing. Not necessarily a good thing either. But, all right, so creating a space for people to interact with. Good. Sticking up for people when they're being attacked on the internet. Or, I mean, in general, really. But this happens a lot more, you know, when people gang up on somebody who says something they don't like on the internet. Like, maybe try and help that person in any way that you can. Like, it could be something as simple as just a reassuring, like, hey, I'm sorry this is happening to you. Like, you're a good person. You may not know if that person's a good person. Hopefully they are. But, like, for the most part, if they're getting attacked with unnecessary crap, sometimes a kind word is all somebody needs. Yes? Oh yeah, the very first MagFest. Yeah, well, not to go too much into MagFest history, because this isn't a MagFest history panel, but basically, a couple of guys who were at the first one bought the rights to the name because the guy who originally did it didn't want to do it anymore. And they're like, well, we want it to keep happening, so we're going to do it. And then it did. So yeah, that is a similar thing in that, you know, the first group is just like, I don't want to do this anymore. A lot of times it's more of, you're doing things a certain way and I don't like it that way, so I'm going to go off and start my own convention with blackjack and hookers. Like, Futurama quotes for days. All right, look, we've got like 1 minute. Yeah, what's up? Yes, that is actually a good way to tie this up, because that brings back to a couple of things. Yeah. Where's the line on that? Yeah. So, I'm sorry, only because we have 5 minutes left, really, and they probably want to break this down a little bit before that. I'm cutting you off only because I hope I'm going to answer exactly what we were going to say. We'll see. If not, maybe I'm just a giant jerk who cuts people off. But no, all right. So, talking about... God, I went so far in explaining, I've already forgot. No, shit. I'm sorry. No, just lay it on me. Yeah, irony. No, please. I'm actually not being a jerk. Like, please, help me out here. What were you going to say? Yes. I hadn't heard that one. That's okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And so this is a thing, right? Is that you can hope by explaining fallacies to people that they'll just take it in stride, right? Because sometimes people just don't know. Sometimes people are legitimately ignorant of something and they don't know it. And if you explain to them, hey, maybe do this instead, or maybe, like, you're wrong and here's why, if you're not a jerk about it, a lot of the times people will be like, wow, I didn't realize that. Thank you for telling me. And will in turn be nice to other people, or at least we can live in hope that that's going to happen. Sometimes, as we said earlier, sometimes people stick to what they've said, even if they're told that it's wrong. So basically, my ending point here, as we are just about out of time, the best way to interact with fandoms, don't be a dick. If you have to argue with someone, be as positive as possible, and if they are arguing from a completely wrong point of view, do your best to go and explain why they might be wrong, while at the same time going and giving what may be right. But at the end of it, if you're dealing with more abstract things, understand that you being right doesn't necessarily, one, matter, and two, prevent somebody else from being right. Nothing really about fandoms, I should say, nothing really ever has to be definitively answered unless the work says it does. Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's right. Like, people, a lot of the times, yeah, I mean, there've got to be people who just sometimes, like, I gotta be right. But really, I think people just want to tell people, like, hey, this is this thing. I know this thing. Let me share this knowledge with you. That's human nature. Like, that's how we are. We share knowledge with people. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't trying to do the exact same thing to you guys. So, yes, it can slippery slope, which I didn't talk about only because it's pretty common. But, all right, it is actually the end of the panel now. I will be happy to talk to you after the panel, unfortunately. But thank you, all of you, for coming out and I guess resting your feet from the concert. But thanks for coming anyway, guys.